The interesting thing I say about Indianapolis is, and when people talk about it being really white here, and it is, but there is a huge Black community in Indianapolis and a huge Indian community and a growing Chinese community here and an Asian community in general. And I feel like when people are saying it's really white there, they're doing exactly what people have been doing for years and completely discounting large groups of people and completely discounting the fact that there is diversity here.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Medeiros.
And I'm Colleen Hungerford. And this is We're Doing This Right, right? A podcast for the whole woman, mind, body, soul, and business.
It's humor infused, as real as it gets, inspiring, and you'll walk away with real usable tools for life and business.
If you love what you're hearing, please share with a friend, subscribe so you'll never miss an episode, and rate and review whenever you listen.
So find your earbuds, lace up your walking shoes, or cozy up with a beverage of your choice. It's time to dig in.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to We're Doing This Right, right? I'm here with Colleen Hungerford, and this is Cheryl Medeiros.
And, oh my God, we're like on one of those nighttime shows now. This feels like one of those like evening shows.
Colleen, give us your big announcement, Colleen. How is your life better today?
Oh my God, last day of school. And I know everybody's going to be like, oh, that means your kids are home. And yes, that is true. But I figured out this life hack a couple years ago where I hire a nanny for the summer that comes at 9 a.m. from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. every single day. Well, Monday through Friday. And she just takes my kids wherever they need to go. She comes up with activities. She plays with them. It's like having an au pair for the summer, but she doesn't live here, which means that I am not responsible for waking anybody up. I'm not responsible for taking anybody anywhere. I can like fully, like, this is my time to shine in work and in personal life. And it's like the best time of year for me. And I just love it so much.
I'm so happy for you.
I realize that not everybody is loving this summertime. It's not, if you can do it, it's actually cheaper for us, similar to like your au pair situation. Like, it's cheaper for me to have one nanny watch all three kids than send each kid to a camp. And then I still have to take them, whatever. So if you can do it, highly recommend. Highly recommend.
For you.
Yes.
Very happy for you.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that.
Well, we have a guest here today, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi.
And I'm just realizing that I'm probably going to have echo today. And so I'm sorry because I screwed up and didn't put you guys in my ear for some reason.
Oh.
So sorry, you guys. I don't know if I can fix it while I'm on here live, but we're going to roll with it. So here we go. We're not going to restart again because we've already had technical difficulties. So
totally my fault.
I usually sound like I'm in a toilet, so you're fine.
Listen, we're not perfect, and you guys know that about us. So here we go. So we have a guest. Her name is Regina Very Modesto, and she is so this is her bio that she sent me. She's middle-aged, which is a sweet way to introduce yourself, and she's just trying to figure it all out. Her titles include mom, wife, friend, real estate broker, and volunteer. She is also serving on the board of the NAHREP. And I said, could you please elaborate? And she said that's the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals. And when I asked what she wanted to talk about, she wanted to talk about how to be an ally and not a douche. So I cannot wait to unpack that. So welcome, Regina. And you'll hear me call her Gina over and over because that's how I know her. But she says that's how she measures if you're her friend or not, whether you call her Regina or Gina. So if you know Regina as Regina, you just got checked.
Yeah.
Sorry for your luck.
We just haven't gotten there yet.
Okay, work in progress.
Exactly.
Love it. So start at conception. Tell us everything. Who are you?
Yeah, tell us everything about you and how you got involved with this and
Cool.
what's happening.
So I got a lot of stories to tell, but most importantly, what I want to talk about allyship is it's called NAHREP is the shortened version of it, NAHREP. And so my husband is Dominican, born in America, but his parents are both immigrants. So he's first generation. And we've been together about 10 years. We have our 5-year-old son in a Hispanic immersion preschool. He's going into a Spanish immersion. He's going into Spanish immersion kindergarten. And I only barely speak vacation Spanish at best. So I gotta get moving before he starts cursing me out in Spanish and I don't even know it.
I love it.
Yeah. I got started with NAHREP a couple years ago. A colleague of mine in my office was like, hey, do you have any volunteer hours times to spend? I was like, I got some time. What's going on? She's like, cool. I'm going to need 2 years commitment from you. And this group hasn't even started yet. So it's going to be 2 years from the start. It's probably going to take us another year. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. So being in Oregon, you may or may not know that Oregon does not have the best history with people of color in general. Look it up if you really want a sad story. It's not good. But the small groups of people of color that we do have here, we're trying to make sure that we increase their visibility and make sure that they have a voice, particularly in real estate. One of the interesting pieces of information is that almost 50% of Hispanic families are homeowners in the United States. When that is a number that has been consistently growing year over year. And so that's important to me because that's who my family is. And my husband, his family has always owned a home. My family has always owned a home. And I think it's a distinct differentiation for kids and families growing up and having that stable home life.
That's such an interesting statistic. I went to grad school in Oregon, so I spent 2 years in the Willamette Valley in Corvallis, and I can attest that it is white as hell.
Yeah. When tanned white women are getting mistaken for Hispanic, it is a white place.
Welcome to my life, man. Like, if anybody has ever seen our videos or seen me, like, I am culturally ambiguous is what I call myself, because when I went to school in Indiana, when I went to school in Oregon, I am Greek and Italian and Irish and English, as my dad will make sure that I tell you. But to some people look Hispanic, like, or like a Latina, and that's fine, right? But it was just such an interesting experience because I grew up in LA and San Francisco, where there were lots of people that looked like me, you know, and I can talk about this, but like when I went to Indiana for undergrad, 20 years ago, every other day I got asked, what are you mixed with? Like, and I was like, it was a weird situation where I came from this very culturally diverse community to a not. And I was like, I don't really understand your question. Like, what are you talking about? But there weren't a lot of people that looked like me. And I am also just a white lady. So it was really interesting. So I can have some reality on what's happening in Oregon, at least like a tiny toe dipped into that pool.
Okay, well, I'm glad you said that because I was going to ask. I grew up in very white Northern California, and I now live on the very white Central Coast of California. We have had Hispanics in both places, more here than in Northern California, but both have been very whitewashed where I've lived. And then my family is from the Midwest, which is also very whitewashed where I was from. And so I was going to ask, where is it not whitewashed? Where is it culturally diverse? Because I haven't experienced that yet.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up, so not that this is
we're called the melting pot.
Yeah. Well, if you're in cities like Los Angeles, they are, and San Francisco, they are diverse. Now, that doesn't say that within those communities, there aren't lots of areas that are not diverse, right? Like there are lots of areas that still need a lot of work or are separated by, like redlining that still exists and things like that. But I grew up in a pretty culturally diverse community and environment, and I was lucky enough to be a part of that. So for me, it was like such a weird experience. When I went to IU, they were warning almost all the white kids that were coming there, like, it's really diverse here, so you're going to have to be really tolerant. And I looked around and I was like, what? I remember sitting in a huge lecture hall during orientation, and I swear to God, I turned around and I think I saw like 4 African American students and 2 Asian students and not very many Hispanic students. And I was like, whoa. But for some people, like I had friends who grew up in small towns that had never met a Jewish person before. And I was like, whoa, this is a whole
Well,
different
and
world.
let me ask, and I will be the ignorant one here that just has not had the world experience to know, but is that verbiage not problematic? That we need to be tolerant? Like, don't we just need to be like
Yeah. And it wasn't, I
loving
would
and
say that was
accepting? And
my verbiage, not
but
theirs. Not my verbiage,
okay,
not
but
theirs. That wasn't what they were saying. But it was very
what
much
would be
that
appropriate? Yeah,
theme,
yeah.
right?
But what are we like? What are we like? We need to be
Don't
allies.
be a
We need to
douche.
be open.
Don't be a
Don't be a
douche.
douche.
And this
Yeah,
was 20 years ago in
yeah.
Indiana, so much different. But yeah, don't be a douche. And Regina, talk to us about your work on in allyship, and talk to us about what you're doing. You and I both have husbands that are Hispanic or Latino or Latinx, however they want to identify. And I think that gives us a little bit of a insight, I would suppose. It doesn't give me full reality, right? And also, my husband is the whitest presenting Mexican you've ever seen.
Yeah.
So talk to us about the work you're
So
doing.
so I've had my real estate license for 7 years. Wait, 7 years. I'm just working on all of my continuing education to renew this year. So no big deal. I've almost got it done. Not to toot my own horn, but honk honk. Ahead of schedule. It's not like due tomorrow. It's due like
Yes.
later this summer. But it's just, I was so focused when I got licensed the same week I found out I was pregnant. And it was a mad dash for 9 months to like get my business off the ground and like get things going so that I could have a nest egg to be able to afford to put my son into daycare. Because with real estate, if you don't have anything actively in escrow, you're not making money, right? And if you're spending money to put a child into daycare to go not make money, it's a hard balance, right? So I had to hurry up and get my business off the ground so that I could afford to put him in daycare to continue to make my business grow. And at that point I was really focused on just like my circle, your sphere of influence, as they say. And I was like really chatting with my friends and like, seeing, but all my friends are like pretty white, pretty at that time, pretty middle-aged, and being more in an office space. Like this is also like 2019, 2020, all hell broke loose. I didn't see another real estate agent that wasn't in passing or on a Zoom call for like 2 years. So once I got back into an office, there were colleagues that I'd never met before. And I was, in the office trying to like recuperate from the craziness that was 2021. And I'd made friends with her and we'd chatted and she's like, "Oh, hey, do you have time to volunteer?" I was like, "Yeah, I am actually." I was looking for volunteer opportunities. I didn't, one of the things about real estate is that you have a lot of time. You have no time, but all of the time. And it's hard to explain unless you're a real estate agent.
Right.
But like, I have time to sit here and chat with you guys for an hour in the middle of the day on a Tuesday. But if someone was like, "Oh, hey, do you want to go for a hike?" I'm like, I don't have that kind of time. I don't have that kind of time. So so I had this time to create volunteer space. And she said, "We're trying to put together an Oregon chapter of this Hispanic real estate association." I'm like, I had the documentation to put my kid into the Spanish immersion preschool on my desk. So I was filling out the paperwork when she came up and talked to me. I was like, I think I'm supposed to do this. I don't have a higher power I really believe in, but I definitely believe in like a rhythm to the universe. And the rhythm of the universe was telling me I got to do this. So we're still in a growing process. I mean, that was 2 years ago, and our organization has only been off the ground since August of last year. So NAHREP's goal is to advocate and educate mostly real estate agents about working with the Hispanic population, whether that is language translations, right? Like that should not be me. Working with first-time home buyers, working with complex lending situations. So I-10 buyers, people that don't have down payments, trying to get them different bond programs that your state is doing and trying to connect them with the correct housing association. Here in Portland, we have the Portland Housing Association. We have Hacienda CDC, which helps individuals of all races and colors get their down payment, because that's going to be the biggest thing. And I mean, I even see that with, middle class white clients. Getting the down payment is the hardest part of the whole home buying process, right? You might be able to handle your monthly payments, but trying to come up with a chunk of change to get you in, that's the hardest part. So just making sure that people understand how strong the Hispanic community is and how much it's growing. So there's a comedian, Harry Condovolo. He's had a comedian's comic special called Patiently Waiting for 2042, because 2042 is the year that the government expects that white people will be the minority.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and that's a combination of multicultural marriages. That's a combination of immigration, and it's coming. And you better get on the bus or get out of the way.
Wow. I had never heard that before. Cheryl, have you heard that?
No, I mean, I think I had heard that white people would be the minority at some point. I didn't know when.
That's the government's best. If you look up like the census data, that's their best guess is 2042.
Wow, that's 20 years, less than 20 years, right? 2042.
And I like to say that I'm because I'm helping work towards that.
Yeah, I have. We really are helping the cause, and Cheryl is not. So
we will hold the phone. Let's remember that I am every year inviting a new person, like Latina person of color, to live in my home with me.
Yeah,
and I'm exposing my children to different cultures and different languages.
Correct. Didn't mean to shoot you down. I just
that one of the largest reasons we're doing that is because there is no diversity where we live, and we want them to grow up with diversity. So the first time that August was exposed to Martin Luther King Day at school, and they were starting to teach her some of the lessons, Louis, our first au pair from Brazil, has very dark skin and presents Black. And August had a lot of questions about, wait a minute, what does this mean about Louis? And I'm like, I know, isn't that crazy that like not that long ago, like Louis would have been treated very differently. And to be completely honest with you, when she arrived here, she was treated very differently in our little tiny town that we live in by our post office. And I had to go down and raise effing hell in there. And like, how dare you treat this person this way? How dare you treat any
What you have to
person
remember
this
is that
way?
not every immigrant has like an angry white woman fighting for them. And so that is what my only goal is to be the angry white woman for anyone that needs one.
Right. Well, and it happens. I mean, my last au pair, who is Colombian and, you know, I'm sure presented most recently to the most recent bigot that she experienced, presented probably Mexican to him. He had the most disgusting words for her, and both my husband and I, like, it took every ounce of our being to not go and unleash on this man that was so disgusting to her. And it's like, how is this still happening? And one of the things that, not to get political on this podcast, but for a moment, one of the things that was most eye-opening about when Donald Trump was president was how okay he made it for people to be hateful, and how comfortable people became being outwardly mean. That was very uncomfortable.
I think that one of the things that
it took the blanket off, right? Like none of that was non-existent. It was just undercover. And to your point, that allowed all of those, it gave a voice, it gave a platform for people to just openly be hateful. And interestingly, like I felt like, because I grew up in two very metropolitan cities that are very culturally diverse, I was almost sheltered, because when I went to the Midwest, I didn't realize the KKK still existed. I didn't realize that people felt this way still. And it was so eye-opening for me, because I was living in a bubble, right? Like a good one, but I was living in a bubble, and I didn't. It's very, very, very interesting. And you still
got to
see
keep
it.
in mind that statistic I gave you of a vast, white people being that minority by 2042, that is not a good thing for a lot of folks, right? Like, I don't know how old or if your father's still alive. My father is going to be 69 this year, and he is used to being top dog, right? He is used to being the best looking, the tallest, the strongest, the best paid, like being in a room and being the strongest and knowing that he can do whatever he wants. And I think that is part of the problem, is that these gentlemen have, these are also the gentlemen and the individuals that grew up on the cusp of women's rights movements in the late 70s and early 80s, and like women coming into the workforce, right? My dad is a wonderful man, and he did, quote, all the right things by letting my mom go to college and letting her be out of the house when we were young. So he let her do all those things when we were young. But I mean, now she's got 2 master's degrees and a doctorate. So like, it's Dr. and Mr. Very over there now. But it's those kind of individuals that don't understand, like, they don't understand that they are not, it's not their time anymore.
And probably there's some fear behind. I listen to the Armchair Expert podcast all the time, and Dax does a really good job of just identifying that a lot of this hatred and a lot of that, those behaviors often really just are stemming from fear, and that doesn't make it okay. It does help understand where it's coming from, but it certainly doesn't make it okay. I don't know the answer, except stop being a douchebag.
It is like the most like all-encompassing like phrase. Like, just don't be terrible.
Right. Don't be terrible. Understand that you're afraid, but these other people have been more afraid longer and have suffered so much more. My husband just did his first diversity, equity, and inclusion training day ever. And it's so interesting, the things he came back that he learned for the first time. And his mind was blown.
Can we have for instance? What was something that he learned for the first time?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this one thing that stands out is he sends me this quote, and it says, "Do the best you can until you know better, and then do better." And I was like,
You're like, I've been saying that on my podcast for like a year now.
Has he never read a parenting book?
Is that the first time you've seen that? He's like, yeah, or maybe it's the first time it resonated. Like, maybe it was the first time he saw it and it hit home, because he'd heard all these stories and all these different scenarios, because this group he's in does a really good job of putting it in their faces. It's like an all-day event where they have a topic and they go through all these different stories and experiences to drive the topic home. And it was very interesting to see his perspective on things. And I know it's hard for him because he's a white male, which, they are the person that's targeted right now. Like, they're wrong. They're the enemy right now. And he doesn't feel like the enemy because he wants to be the ally. And so that's really, like, it's hard. And I feel for him because he wants to be the ally. But he's like, meh, meh. Like, everybody's just beating on him everywhere he goes because he's the white male. I'm like,
well, I will say, like,
you're like, welcome to everyone else's life. Welcome to the world.
I know.
I will say, like,
you just have to step back for a little bit,
like, and what you look like,
put other people
like
forward.
What you look like changes people's perspective of you, right? So, like, I show up to events looking like this: blonde hair, white, super white, fat, tall, like all of the things that are like the exact opposite of what everyone expects me to go talk about. And then, like, they see me like talk passionately about NAHREP and their mission and trying to educate. Like, we're not just trying to educate Hispanic real estate agents. We're trying to educate agents about how to work with Hispanic folks, because there's just things you don't think about, right? Multigenerational housing, right? Like, that is like my husband's family, like, they own a house in Florida, and it's 3 generations living in that house at any given time. That is significantly different than my family grew up, where there was never there were visitors of extra generations coming. It was just me and my nuclear family at all times, right? His family had cousins coming and going, and, sponsoring family from another country coming and going. And so those housing needs are very specific to non-white cultures, is what I'm going to say, because that is universally, like, it's very American of us to not live generationally.
Yeah, it's so interesting you talk about that. So where I live, even though where I live in Indiana, while people think it's pretty white, the city that I live in is almost 20% Indian, and we also have a huge Chinese population.
Wait, I have
And
pause. I need
I,
clarification. Do you live in Indiana right now?
I
Wait,
do,
like
yeah,
on
yeah.
purpose? Like blink twice if you're being held hostage.
No, on purpose. Yeah, I'll tell you my story. It's great. It's a wonderful story, and it's actually lovely here, and it's much more diverse than people understand because I live in
Oh,
Indianapolis.
okay. All right. Well,
But we're 20% in Carmel. In Carmel, the city that I live in, it's almost 20% Indian. The schools are 20% Indian, the public schools, and a huge population of Chinese. And to your point, we have a lot of clients here who are looking for multi-generational homes, and we're also looking for a lot of specific things, and maybe you talk about this, but like because they're multi-generational, we need a lot of first floor living, we need a lot of main floor living, we need a lot of guest suites, and it's a different type of job. Like it's a different type of real estate to be looking for these bigger family estates or these bigger family homes, because we don't really have, like, different than California, we don't really have like ADUs. Like that's not
right.
really a thing here. Everyone's living in the same
Facility.
home building together. And it's very interesting. And yes, I'll tell you the story about why I moved here. I'll tell you another time because it's a long story, but it's wonderful. And it's been exponential growth for our family to be
I mean,
here.
yeah, because
And,
it's like $7
you know,
a square foot there.
yeah, it's a much more affordable. And the interesting thing I say about Indianapolis is, and when people talk about it being really white here, and it is, but there is a huge Black community in Indianapolis and a huge Indian community and a growing Chinese community here and an Asian community in general. And I feel like when people are saying it's really white there, they're doing exactly what people have been doing for years and completely discounting large groups of people and completely discounting the fact that there is diversity here. But what I found is interesting here, especially in Carmel, which is like a very wealthy suburb of Indianapolis, people say it's so white there. And what they mean is that there are no Black people, no African American people in Carmel. But that means they're completely discounting the Indian population that's here, the Southeast Asian population that's here, the Chinese populations that here, the Latino Hispanic population that's here, because so many people look at race as Black and white, or they look at diversity as Black and white. And I, like I could talk a billion years about this, but like that is such a discredit to people's cultures. It's erasing people in big sweeps of like just discrediting that they even exist because it's not one or the other. And I think as Americans, we really define diversity. And I say this because you're talking about a Hispanic population, and my kids are Hispanic. Like we define diversity as Black and
Well,
white.
and the other thing,
But these other,
well, I was going to add, like, where
yeah,
you can't discount the socioeconomic status of folks as well, and that's the
correct.
when we talk about, so often, especially when white folks talk about race, they are automatically adding the socioeconomic layer, automatic, like without question. Like, oh, everyone assumes that because I work with the NAHREP, they're like, oh, so you're working with individuals that always need assistance. I'm like, no. These assistance programs that I learn about are important for all of my clients, because I'm going to let you know a little secret. It's really expensive in Portland based on income caps, right? We need more people to be able to get that assistance rather than super duper low income folks. It's just, unfortunately, because of history, socioeconomics get folded in with that as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's cultural bias at its core, right? Like that's a clear definition of a cultural and racial bias, is assuming that because someone's not white, that they're not rich or that they're not wealthy. And it's just obviously not the case. But we were very intentional when we moved here. So about the schools that they went to, kind of like what you're talking about when is my kids are white presenting. And if we were looking for homes and looking for school districts and whatever, and I chose to send them to private school because some of the school districts here are pretty white. And I went and interviewed one of the counselors at one of the elementary schools in the town just above mine. And my best friend went with me, and she knows how passionate I am about this. And she was like, so talk to us about your, diversity and equity and inclusion programs at your school. Like, tell us about that. And this man, white man, who is the counselor at school, said, well, we have Martin Luther King Day. We celebrate that. But people just felt like we didn't do enough for that. And he's like, and I don't see color. So blah. And I was just
no.
this was still in 2021. And I was wearing a mask. And my face was like, that's awful to say. Number one, stop, full stop, right? But number two, this man was the school counselor at this school. So if there was a child of color who was being bullied or being upset about something or whatever, and this is the man that they had to go to, like, can you imagine?
No, I can't.
And I was like, I can't. And it would be very easy for my kids to go to that school and just be white kids, right? Because they just would be.
For anyone who's not heard, like for the first time they're hearing that, explain why to not see color is not an okay thing. And they're like, wait, I don't see color. I don't understand. Explain why it's like, because I think that used to be like the positive thing to say is like, I don't see color. I don't see color. Like, but that's no longer, that's not being an ally. You need to see color because
it discounts someone's life experiences. It discounts who they are as a human being.
And
oh, I don't see you. Like, I love being blonde. I work really hard to be blonde. If someone's like, oh, I didn't realize you were blonde. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me, man? I'm blonde. I work so hard to be blonde. How have you not seen that? It's kind of, I mean, obviously.
And so, and part of, like a person of color, like that is part of their identity, and that is definitive of their experiences. And that is part of their culture and what somebody's proud of and what makes them special and what makes them different in the best way, right? So if you're like, well, I don't even notice, you're really just saying, well, I don't really notice you as a person, and I'm just assuming that we're all the same, quote unquote, which we're clearly not.
And additionally, discounting the fact that other people very much do see color and may see it negatively. So you're discounting life experiences, negative life experiences that person may have had that may be setting them back. And not only that single person's individual experience, but the systemic experiences that the ancestors of that person have experienced that have put them in this socioeconomic position that they are in, that they have had no choice to be in, that they maybe didn't deserve to be in. So oftentimes we hear like, well, I worked very hard to get here. This is like me, white person. I worked very hard.
Yeah.
I do work very hard. Cheryl, Medeiros, white, middle class, have had every opportunity in the world. I do work very hard. I do take advantage of every opportunity. I have had every opportunity. I have had every opportunity in the world, except maybe a few that the white males have gotten that I've not gotten.
Right.
But aside from not being male, I've had every opportunity. I have never, not never, because I'm not male, but I'm not discriminated against because of the color of my skin, because of the people that I've loved, because of a million other types of reasons that people are discriminated against. So to say that you don't see color means you don't see all of the many ways that a person may be discriminated against. So I explained this to someone close to me recently because
that was really cool of you to like protect them.
And this person has like a family secret. Let's say this person has a family secret that is embarrassing to them. And in school, a teacher called this person out on it in front of the whole class. And it was really embarrassing. And that whole year while they were in school, this teacher just constantly put them down. And this student like was just embarrassed by it. And it was almost like wearing a scarlet letter that whole year in school that this family member did this thing. And it was so embarrassing. They just couldn't get away from it anywhere they went. And it like made that 1 year in school really, really hard. And they had no control over that thing that family member did. But it just made that 1 year of their life really, really hard. Okay, now imagine being born a specific race or a specific color or a specific like having a specific sexual orientation or whatever it might be that is different than whoever decided that this one thing is how we're all supposed to be. And
Right.
and then your entire life you wear that scarlet letter. You guys, I'm doing quotes because I don't feel this way, but imagine wearing that scarlet letter all day, every day, and not just that 1 year in class, but there's a group of people that look at you and feel a way about something you have no control about, and you don't have opportunities because these people feel this way, or they might think that, because they heard this one thing, but that's what it could potentially be like to be a person of color or have a sexual orientation. So that was kind of my way of explaining to someone based on an experience they had to make it relevant to them what it could be like to live that experience.
And I think it's really relevant and really important for us to also say that, like, we are 3 white ladies sitting here talking about this. And so, like, there is
always.
So, like, while we have learned and we're continuing to learn and, have experiences, like, the conversation is not all encompassing here. And the experiences that people of color have, or, LGBTQ community, we can't speak for that and we can't speak to that, but we can definitely advocate for allyship and
try to learn
and continue to learn.
Don't forget about optics.
I will put my foot in my mouth all day long, every day. Like I still do it wrong.
Oh, yeah.
I try to learn, and I encourage anyone to call me out. Please teach me, if and be a teacher, but please be a kind teacher. And if you're going to teach, anybody, please be a kind teacher, and give the people an opportunity to learn. And I'm sure that's your goal.
Yeah.
Regina.
So Regina, what are we, like, in your association, like, what are the things that you're doing to help people to not be douchebags? Like, what is the allyship? Like, what are we doing? Like, how are we doing it?
So it is a national organization, right? So they have goals and they have what they want to do, right? But, like, so there is what we do at the local level to create an awareness about the differences that Hispanic families might need in their home buying process, right? I mentioned multi-generational living. I mentioned needing to put multiple people on a mortgage, a mom and an aunt and an uncle all buying a house together, kind of a thing, dealing with, difficult financial situations, I-10s, if they're not a citizen, buying with an I-10 number versus a social security number, those kinds of things. But for me personally, why I like being a part of the group is that I did not know this at the time, right? My goal was just to be like, how can I help? What can I do, right? My goal at the time was, let me jump in here and do some behind the scenes work, not be up in front. I don't need to be there. I'm really good at PowerPoint. So I was like, I can just, like, put a PowerPoint together. It's not a big deal. The thing that was told to me that I didn't realize was, we had this big kickoff event. Like, hey, this is what we're trying to do. Everyone come together, like, help us move this forward. And there were individuals from our governing boards, right? And, in real estate, you have state governing boards. There were people at those events that came up to me afterwards, like, say, hey, I was at that event and I was really excited to see a face like mine up there. So I feel like I can connect, because one, these folks did not realize how many Hispanic folks were in our organization, right? They didn't realize how many Hispanic realtors there were. So that's one. So that's fun to, like, a whole room and very little English was being spoken. The second thing is, like, being like, I'm happy to be the touchstone, to be like, if someone doesn't know, because, like, people will say wild shit to you when you're a white person in different spaces. So, like, it's okay. I don't mind, like, hearing someone say wild shit and then, like, what they've told me in a more appropriate way, and then sending them on their way to who they really need to talk to. Like, oh, we wanted to talk to someone about such and such, and having your organization there. I'm like, let me introduce you to so and so. Let me I'm definitely the pass through for a few folks here and there, because not that our group is not approachable, but, like, if I'm very loud. I'm also loud. That was also helpful.
We don't know anything about that.
No.
Cheryl and I have no idea what that's like at all.
Not at all.
But,
No.
I think it's important. It's an interesting reversal of like, if there are people who are trying to get involved in this, but maybe feel like I'm not, maybe feel like an outsider, and then they see you, then they feel like, well, okay, how can I learn to be an ally? How can I also contribute, or
And
how can I,
most real estate,
whatever?
there's different groups for real estate. There's like different alliance organizations. So there's like groups for LGBTQIA agents. There's groups
Mhm.
for NAHREP with a B for Black and African American agents. There is ARIA for Asian Pacific Islander agents. So like there's all these different
Mhm.
I joined in when I joined this office, I had a couple of people come up and be like, "Oh, you should come to this thing. You should come to this thing." I was like, "Do you really need another white lady at those things?" And they were like, "Yeah, we need allyship. We need folks to come." I was like, "Ugh," but I was too nervous about I was uncomfortable being a white woman in those spaces and not knowing what to do. And by not knowing what to do, like understanding like how I can help. And once I understood how I could
Right.
help, I was able to jump in. And I think that was a mistake, if I'm being very honest. If you don't know what to do and you're feeling uncomfortable, jump in anyway and just sit back and watch and like chat with people, make friends, figure out if you want to help. If you want to just show up and be there, that's also helpful too. Because a lot of these organizations, they need the numbers, right? We're
Yeah.
national organizations, and we're judged by our events that we hold, and we're judged by the amount of money we gather and the amount of people at our events. So like all of these national organizations and these local chapters, they need the numbers. So like if you know a couple of people, show up, see what something. You never know how something might resonate with you.
I think what's important, and you're doing this and saying this, is like, to be an ally doesn't mean that like you're up on stage hosting the event.
Please
right?
don't.
Like you're
Please
in the
don't.
back.
Yeah.
Right? Like there is a way to be, we talked about this with Sky Michaels, right? To kind of help from the background and to foster putting, people of color like in the forefront. And that's part of allyship, right? Is to not to say, hey, I would love to be the president. Like I should not be the president of like, I was locally, before I left, I was the president of Women of Compass. I should not have signed up to be the president of like Black at Compass, right? Even though that's a great, I can be supportive or whatever. Like we don't need a white lady up here telling us anything, but I could go to an event if I was invited to an event, or I could help fundraise if I wanted to help fundraise. You know what I mean? Like taking those roles in allyship doesn't mean that you're taking the roles.
Yeah,
I guess that's
it's actually
important to
taking
like
a role is
understand.
not the role. That's a very, very good differentiation, because like, it's also understanding the optics of things. Like so we had an event about a month ago, and the three presenters on stage were three white men. And we were chatting about like how we wanted the flow to go. And I was like, they're like, oh, I was like, oh, I can go through this and I can do this part. And they're like, oh, are you going to do this part too? I was like, oh, no. We need to get our president up there. Our president needs to be up there asking these questions. Because the last thing we need at a NAHREP event is a white woman asking three white men about issues about Hispanic folks. I was like, no, thanks. That's not a good look.
Yeah.
And one of the guys was like, oh, good. Yeah, I agree. That's not a good look.
I have to tell you guys the cutest, funniest thing, right? So, like I said before, I am culturally ambiguous. I have like tan olive skin and dark eyes and dark hair. And my daughter is blonde and blue eyed, looks like she could be Cheryl's kid. But my two boys look just like me. And at our school, they work on identity projects. We go to this really awesome progressive education school. And very early on, they talk about identity and self-identity. And they're always drawing themselves. And my boys always draw themselves as brown. And I think it is just so interesting. Like, when I was growing up, I would have reached for the peach. Like if I was drawing my skin color, I would have reached for the peach crayon, probably because there were only peach or brown, right? Like we didn't have all the different crayons. But my boys really see them as tanned or brown or something like that, where Vivian doesn't. And every time it comes home, I don't laugh, but I'm just like, wow, this is really interesting how they view themselves and how self-identity is so important, right? Like how we see ourselves is important to how we're presenting ourselves in a community and how we're showing up and things like that. But I'm always like, oh my God, as a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, like this is how they're seeing themselves. And it's not anything other than like interesting. And I always said it to my sister, and she's like, well, your son thinks he's black. And I'm like, okay, well, he's not. He's just brown. But we didn't like have that experience as children, right? Like we didn't do self-discovery or self-identification or identity projects at all. And I'm hoping that, that makes the kids that are now doing that like a little bit more aware, right? Like they do a little bit, everybody's a little bit more aware of their own identity, which is helpful in understanding other people's identity, I think. But it's just
my
so
son
funny.
drew a family portrait
like,
and we
oh
were
my
all
God.
blue and I had no arms. So I assume that means we're the Cookie Monster family.
I love it. I love
Or
it. I want to be the
Bluey.
Cookie Monster family.
Yeah.
Big fan of Bluey over here.
Oh my
Okay,
gosh.
well, Regina, please tell us how, number one, we can get more information about NAHREP and how we can get more information about Regina Very Modesto and where people can connect
Awesome.
with you.
So I am very Googleable because I am a real estate agent. I'm licensed in Washington and in Oregon. Regina Very at kw.com. Great email. My number is all online. Call me. Also, nahrep.org.
Slide into your DMs.
I'm sorry.
Slide into your
those
DMs.
nahrep.org is the national website or national. And then here in Oregon, there's only one chapter. So we are NAHREP Western Oregon. So if you are interested in joining or hanging out with us, let us know.
Awesome.
Well, thank you for helping
you
me
so
be
much.
slightly less douchey today. I really appreciate
just
that.
in this area. I don't know. You might be douchey in other ways.
Do. I definitely am. That's just who I am. I'm a little bit douchey. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much,
And
It was so fun hanging out with you guys.
thank you and good night. I know. Thanks for hanging.
Thanks.
Bye.
All right.
That's a wrap. Thank you for joining us on this journey of laughter, life, and growth.
And remember, you're not alone on this path to success. We're right here with you every step of the way.
Please remember to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you found value in today's conversation, we'd be thrilled if you would leave us a review on your favorite platform. Your feedback means the world to us.
And don't forget to share this podcast with your friends, family, and anyone who could use a good laugh and some practical insight into navigating the challenges and triumphs of our minds, body, soul, and business.
Remember, we're doing this right.